On this week's edition of Nosebleed Radio, we welcome on Carrington Harrison of 610 Sports. We talk sports and pop culture with him. Before the interview, we discuss the NHL playoffs. We go through and preview each series. Got some wild NBA playoffs going on. We'll talk about that. After the interview, we'll have MLB baseball. Talk about why the Royals suck so much and why the Red Sox are so good. Then we talk about the new rule changes for the NCAA. We got some interesting ones. Roll the music.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
You're listening to Nosebleed Radio. Here's your host, Tucker Franklin.
What is up? Episode 12 of Nosebleed Radio is live. At the time, I'm here with the boys, Kieran Brennan.
How's it going?
Toby Todd.
What's up?
And Shane Miller.
Hey, how's it going, Roll Hawks?
This will be our last episode in studio for a while. We're on summer break after this. We're going to pack up and head home after we get done with this episode here. So we're going to go ahead and start with our famous number 12 since it's episode number 12. Shane, you want to start us?
Yeah, so this one might be one you guys haven't heard of in a while. And I think he's been out of the news for a long time, but Tom Brady wears number 12, if you guys don't know. He's my pick for number 12, mostly to piss off Toby. But my other number 12 would be Roger Staubach, one of my favorite Cowboy quarterbacks ever. Take it away, Toby.
Well, since the greatest number 12 of all time has already been taken, I'm going to go with two of my personal favorite number 12s besides the big man in New England. I'm going to go with another guy from the New England area, though, Terry Rozier, Boston Celtics. He's having a great series. Eric Bledsoe finally knows who he is. And then I'm going to go Chris Evans, running back for Michigan. Splitting carries him and Karan Higdon throughout the year. But that's a dynamic duo in the backfield, and hopefully they lead us to victory over all opponents, especially Nebraska.
It's pretty incredible he can play sports and also be Captain America. So that's kind of wild.
He's just that damn good.
All right, for my number 12s, I'm going to go with my personal favorite, Andrew Luck. Hopefully we see him out on the football field more often this year. Probably once. Would be more often, I guess. My second number 12, I'm going to go with Jim Kelly. We wish him luck in his fight against oral cancer. Cancer hasn't met a tougher opponent yet.
Fun fact, my dad has a pair of autographed cleats by Jim Kelly.
That is a fun fact.
Super fun.
My number 12 is Jorge Soler for the Kansas City Royals. Fun fact about Jorge Soler.
Fun fact podcast.
Yes, pro fun fact podcast. Jorge Soler has seen the most pitches per at-bat than any Royal has since 2003, averaging about 4 pitches per at-bat, which is not a lot. Royals don't like to watch pitches. My other number 12 is Mike Fisher, former captain of the Nashville Predators. Came back this year after retirement. Carrie Underwood is his wife, smoking hot.
So, Carrie, if you're listening, Tucker has a crush on you. Give him a call.
Yeah, I do. Whatever. My last number 12 is Garrick Dieter. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. That's not Derek Jeter trying to play football. He's a wide receiver who plays for the Kansas City Chiefs from Alabama.
How does he spell Gehrig?
Like Lou Gehrig.
Like Lou Gehrig?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just wonder. I bet that's who he's named after, too.
Yeah, and Dieter is Dieter. We'll go ahead and move on to the NHL playoffs. 2 of the 3 teams of our favorite teams advanced to the second round. Toby's Sharks, my Predators. So sorry, Shane. Shane said he did some calculations in...
As we know, I'm not a math guy, so I think I did the math wrong. The Devils' year is actually next year. So looking forward to next season already. You know, like Happy Gilmore, I'm in the batting cage taking shots to the face because there's only 364 days until next year's hockey tryouts. That's my mentality right now.
Toby, what do you think about your Sharks?
I'm really, really optimistic. I think it's easy to be optimistic when you see your favorite team sweep a team in as dominant fashion as we swept the Ducks. I know the Knights also swept the Kings in the first round, and that was great for them, and it was great for the city of Las Vegas. But there was no more dominant team in the first round than the San Jose Sharks. So I'm very excited heading into this series with a team that's still, you know, they're a very talented team. They've got a lot of great players. Marc-Andre Fleury certainly not. He's not a first-year guy. He's not one of these guys on the Knights who's never been in the postseason. He's been there. He's done that. He's won cups. It's sort of overstated how new all the Knights are to this, especially since they have so many players. James Neal, who used to be on the Predators, a lot of playoff experience, but I'm very excited. I think we played so well in the first round. I'm just hoping that the long layoff didn't, hurt the momentum of the Sharks. And if so, hopefully it affects both teams momentum-wise if we are to come back a little rusty. But I'm looking forward to a really good series there, and I do believe wholeheartedly the Sharks will win that series.
This is going to be a really good series. These are two teams coming just steamrolling their opponents. I have a feeling this is probably going to be the most competitive series of these last 4 series. Vegas has a real good home ice advantage. Sharks also have real good home ice. I don't see any of these series not going to at least like 6 games. All these teams are really good. We're all in for some good hockey.
I really like the part where our best players are all very ugly, so they're not going to be picking up a whole lot of girls in Vegas, staying out late at night on the town and stuff like that.
Vegas flu.
Right, exactly. I think that plays into Vegas home ice advantage. I think our guys are so bad looking. Our best player has maybe 4 or 5 teeth left in his mouth. So so I doubt he's going to be a guy that's going to be hitting up the town of Vegas. When we go there, hopefully we can just steal one game in Vegas, take it back to the tank, because as good as Vegas home ice advantage is, I'd say the tank provides a lot of stability for the Sharks. I feel like we play really, really well at home, including that 8-1 beatdown we had of the Ducks in Game 3. So I agree. I think a lot of these series are going to be really, really competitive. There's only one series that I could see that maybe gets out of hand. That's the Capitals-Penguins, just because the Capitals come up against the Penguins and they just play scared. They haven't beaten them in a series, so I think there's a lot of doubt in the Capitals players' minds that it's can we do this? Whereas a lot of Penguins players who have won the Stanley Cup the past 2 years are saying, all right, yeah, we've been here, done that, beat this team. This is nothing new to us. That's the only series that I could see. But I agree with you. The other series look like they're going to be really, really competitive, and it looks like there is going to be a lot of great hockey because you look around the league, and it's very, very plausible that these are the actual 8 best teams that advance to this stage.
Speaking of Capitals Penguins, how many times do you think they're going to let this series happen over and over and over until they just stop allowing Washington to be in the same bracket as the Penguins? That's starting to get to an unfair advantage where Washington can't ever make it to the Stanley Cup because they always have to go to the Penguins and they always lose every single year.
Washington is 1-9 in these playoff series against the Penguins.
Yeah, just garbage.
Every time the Penguins have won, in recent memory, every time the Penguins have won the Stanley Cup, they've beaten the Capitals on the way to the Stanley Cup. If I'm a Capitals fan and I'm a Capitals player, Penguins kind of have a little summer home built in my head. They have that unfair advantage, that unfair mental advantage, which in the Stanley Cup, which is 3 months of playoffs, arguably, I think in my opinion, the hardest playoffs. I mean, mental advantage is key, and the Penguins obviously have that on the Capitals.
Hey, you know how you make Alex Ovechkin's favorite drink? White Russian with no cup.
I saw a stat earlier this week that said it's the 3rd time that the final 4 teams in the Western Conference do not have a Stanley Cup. And I found that interesting. Toby mentioned that the Knights don't have a cup because they're a new franchise. We got a lot of Stanley Cup experience on that team. Marc-Andre Fleury, he's not an expansion goalie. He's not. We heard James Neal in an interview say, that's not a guy you get in an expansion draft, Marc-Andre Fleury. James Neal's a stud. William Karlsson's a stud. He hadn't had a 20-goal season until he went to the Knights, and now he's a 40-goal scorer. William Karlsson just played out of his mind this year. That series will be good. The Sharks are still, they're one of those teams that are quietly good. Because you heard a lot about them when they were going to the Cup, when they, 2 years ago when they went to the Cup, played the Penguins. Last year they had an early exit. But then the Sharks still just keep finding themselves back in the playoffs. And I think that this could be the year where they advance to that Western Conference Finals again. And obviously I think my Preds will make it there. The Preds only lost 1 time to the Jets all season. It was an overtime. Preds aren't historically very good in 3-on-3 overtime. So I'm not really worried about the Jets. I wasn't really worried about the Avalanche, and we beat them 4-2.
You said you're not worried about the Jets. You know their slogan is death from above. Now are you worried about the Jets? Because that's pretty cool.
It's a cool slogan. But you know what also is cool? The Preds always do, for the Nashville Foundation that they have, they do a smash a car. They spray paint a car with the team's logo. This time they brought in a plane. So instead of smashing a car, they'll be smashing a plane.
So if they were playing the planes, I wouldn't be worried.
You talk about momentum a lot going forward in series, and obviously the Knights, Sharks have that. I feel like the Penguins, they played a tough series against the Flyers. Yeah. I feel like they're coming in with a lot of momentum because they beat a team that was really riding a hot streak at the end of the season there. You talk about teams entry with momentum. Well, the Lightning had, it sucks to say, but they kind of had easier series than the Bruins did. Obviously, the Bruins went to
Right.
7 games. However, you come in after a third period. You go into the third period trailing 4-3 yesterday. You put up 4 goals in the third period. You have a rookie score 2 goals in Game 7, which is the third time ever in Bruins history.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to work with there. If you are the Boston Bruins, and I've been on the Boston Bruins all season, as a lot of you guys know, the momentum of winning a Game 7 in a close series like that with a talented Leafs team who has a very promising future, that Leafs team does, I think that there's a momentum there that can be carried on throughout this series against Tampa Bay, despite the fact that Tampa Bay is probably the superior team in terms of talent. There was something about the third period yesterday from Boston where you watched it and you just felt like there's no way, they're going to struggle. There's no way they're going to lose series. And that's honestly how I looked at it yesterday after the absolute monster third period. And I'm hoping that holds true going forward. But I'm really excited about the goalies there. That's an all-time goalie name matchup with Tuukka Rask and Andrei Vasilevsky.
Two great goalies, too.
Yeah, try pronouncing that, SportsCenter anchors.
Are they both up for the Vienza?
Vasilevsky, I think, is. Tuukka Rask is not. I think it's Rene, Hellebuck, and Vasilevsky.
That's also something I didn't talk about, is that the goaltender matchup in Nashville, unreal.
Yeah.
With Pekka Rinne and Connor Hellebuck. If the Preds really want to comfortably win this series, their defense has to show up. They have a very deep defense. The Preds are a very deep team. But the one game where they just got absolutely mauled by the Avalanche was a game where most of their shots came from less than 10 feet in front of the net. So their defense has to do something. You can't just rely on Pekka Rinne to do everything. Pekka Rinne is a great goaltender, but you can't just let him do everything. I was watching that Game 7 last night. What a game that was. You really got to see just the sheer talent of the Bruins. And I'm surprised that series went to 7 games. I can remember we were watching the game where Kadri got suspended.
Yeah.
And the Bruins really just dominated that game, too. I don't know how it got out of hand from the Bruins, how it got to 7 games. I think what happened was when it went back to Toronto, and then they had that tragedy in Toronto and everything, they got more motivation. But I'm honestly very impressed by Toronto to push that to 7 games, because I did not think it was going to go to 7.
I don't think anybody, especially not the Boston fans, didn't expect it to go 7.
Oh, no.
And I don't think, even when they got to Game 7, I think, Boston was sitting pretty comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
They said, we're going to take it back to the Garden. We're going to be all right. And they did get hit in the mouth a few times, because there was a lot of goals scored early in that game. It was 3-3 midway through. Then they picked one up later in the second period, the Leafs did. And at that point, you have to be feeling the heat at least a little bit, and the way the Bruins responded was that of a team that, is a championship team.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me a lot of, I hate to switch it over to sports, but it reminds me of that Game 6 in Oklahoma City the year before Kevin Durant left for Golden State, when Klay Thompson pretty much took it upon himself and said, no, we're not going to lose.
Right.
We're going to bring this back to Oracle. We're going to win the series. So he dropped 47 points to bring him back into that game. And so it reminded me a lot of that, where they just said, nope, our season's not over right now.
We were talking about Boston and Toronto. Both of their NBA teams are in the NBA playoffs. Both couple good series is going on there. Raptors beat the Wizards in Game 5 to take a 3-2 series lead. Toby, what do you think about the Raptors this year so far?
They're such an interesting team because there's no denying the talent level that the Raptors have. There's also no denying the sort of lack of play in the postseason. From notable guys, I mean, even in this series, Kyle Lowry has not shown up the way you'd expect an all-star point guard to show up. And it seems like every playoffs, he'll have a great game. Then he'll have 3 subpar games. He'll have another great game, hopefully make you forget about those subpar performances. And that seems to be what it is right now. The Wizards are just getting far better play from John Wall than the Raptors are from Kyle Lowry. And if not for DeMar DeRozan, and honestly the backup guard yesterday, DeLon Wright, there's a really, really good chance the Wizards would bring this back to Washington, close out in Game 6. But DeMar DeRozan, probably one of the most improved players in the NBA, along with like Oladipo and guys like that. He's just gotten it done for him. And they'll end up winning this series against Washington because of the play of DeRozan, despite the play of Kyle Lowry.
After seeing how LeBron has played, or not LeBron, LeBron's been outstanding per usual, but how the Cavaliers have played against, let's say, supposedly inferior Pacers, does that give you faith that this could be the year that if the Cavaliers move on, the Raptors could finally beat the Cavaliers?
Yes and no, because the Cavaliers' highest scorer besides LeBron in the postseason was Kyle Korver, who had 19 points yesterday. He hit 5 threes. He was like 5 and 9 from 3. And that's the most they've gotten from any other player in the series. I think LeBron hasn't had a single game this postseason where he scored under 25. He's had 2 games over 40. He hit that game winner yesterday, which was incredible. It's hard to pick against them, though, simply because they have LeBron. And you can see what he can do. Like, yesterday they were trailing in the first quarter. He went on a 8-0 run by himself. Every basket a layup. It's just one of those sports where an individual can absolutely just take control of the game. I think the Raptors have enough as a team to be better than that Cavs team, but I don't think they have a player that can outduel LeBron James if need be. I think I'd favor the Cavs in that series still if they were to meet with the Raptors, but it would be much more competitive than in years past because the play of Ibaka has been outstanding in the postseason. The bench has come to life for the Raptors. Meanwhile, for the Cavs, it's kind of been non-existent for the most part. I mean, Jordan Clarkson, he played a really, really good game 4 for him, but you got Clarkson, you got Hood to give you scoring off the bench. They haven't really provided that. If there is a year that the Raptors are going to beat the Cavaliers, or at least beat a LeBron team, it would be this year. I just don't know if it'll happen.
Going off another series in the Eastern Conference, your Celtics battling with those Bucks, and to make you a little worried that they're struggling with the Bucks.
For Celtics fans, you kind of have to put it into perspective, which is really hard for people from Boston because you just expect to win everything, when you're from the city of champions. I think when you look at that series, one thing you can really take away from that series is that Jaylen Brown is going head-to-head with Giannis. In some games, he is outplaying Giannis, who some people have proclaimed a top 10 player in the league. I think the future is really, really bright in Boston. Everybody's been saying, the Celtics year is next year and all that. There's really no excuse for us to lose to this Bucks team, even without Hayward, even without Kyrie. I feel like the Celtics have even more talent than this Bucks team even without those guys. And it's a little concerning when a guy like Chris Middleton scores 20 points on you every game. But no, I'm not too worried about this. I think if it goes back to Game 7 in Boston, just like the Bruins did, that home crowd will get them riled up. The Celtics won't lose that. So I'm not as worried about this series. It would just suck to see another one of my teams, win this and then lose to Philadelphia because I am so tired of them. And I can't believe it worked out this way where we'll play another Philadelphia team in the postseason.
I'm 1,000% positive the Celtics are going to win and then lose to Philadelphia, in Philadelphia, just to crush Toby's soul one more time.
Your soul too. You're a Celtics fan.
Yeah, but I wasn't. I was upset the Eagles won in the Super Bowl, but they beat his team in the Super Bowl. So to beat his team again, I think that's just how it's going to work.
I didn't think you were disowning the Celtics. I was like, right here, really?
Right. And Villanova beat Michigan in the NCAA championship too. So I've had just about enough of Philadelphia. Shouts to Meek Mill though. This is a rap episode.
Philadelphia's just been having your number.
Right. Rob Kraft loved it though. I think Rob Kraft felt like there was a curse that Meek Mill put on him from prison. Now that he's free, he's like, okay, we can beat the Eagles now. It'll be just like 2004 again.
The Western Conference was filled with gentlemen's sweeps. You had Rockets defeating the Wolves 4-1, and the Warriors beating the Spurs 4-1.
They're very gentlemanly out in the West.
Wild West, not really that wild anymore.
Not that wild anymore.
They're full of gentlemen.
Wild, wild East.
I think we can say that we expected both of these series to go this way. Wouldn't you say, Tobes?
I was honestly surprised that the Spurs and Wolves won one game in these series because these are, throughout the regular season, the two best teams, almost hands down. The shocking series, obviously, is the Pelicans sweeping the Blazers. I don't think anybody saw a sweep coming. I think you could believe the Pelicans could beat the Blazers. But the only series left there is probably going to be the most compelling series of the first round because the Thunder, like we said in previous times on this podcast, they were the super team. They were billed as the super team entering the NBA season. The Jazz were a team that was expected to sort of fall off this cliff as soon as Gordon Hayward left. Rudy Gobert was subtweeting him and all this stuff. They rolled the Thunder. 3 straight games after the Game 1 loss in Oklahoma City. They rolled the Thunder. And yesterday it looked like they were going to roll them again because they were up by 15 at halftime. They led by as much as 25 in the third quarter. It's another game where you watched a guy who just said, no, my season's not over yet. And Russell Westbrook had 33 points in the second half. A lot of people have been criticizing him greatly throughout this series, saying that he's been outplayed by Ricky Rubio and stuff. Last night kind of ignited a fire under him a little bit. He's not deferring to Paul George. He's not deferring to Carmelo Anthony. He said, I'm going to get mine, and I'm not going to care how people feel about it. If he plays like that, there's a good chance they win in Utah, and they'll be back in Oklahoma for Game 7. It's not unlikely to think that this Thunder team will come back from 3-1 down and give us a really compelling series against the Rockets. If that's the case. I'm really hoping, the Jazz are my second favorite team, I'm really hoping that Donovan Mitchell and company close it out in Utah. The crowd in Utah was amazing, especially Mitt Romney. So hopefully he's back for Game 6, but, the Thunder win that game. then they'll be on just as big of a roll as any other NBA team winning these last 3 games. And that'll set up a really great semifinal if the Thunder are to pull this off.
So Mitt Romney's the governor of Massachusetts. Why is he just a Utah Jazz fan because they're Mormon?
I think he lives in Utah.
He lives in
Because
Utah
he's Mormon,
because
huh?
he's Mormon.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that it'll be tough. The Thunder, they're going back to Salt Lake City, the city that sleeps constantly, and I think it'll be really tough for them to defeat that home court advantage. You saw the video of Donovan Mitchell just getting choked up. That home court advantage, that was really great. And you know what they say? Clear eyes, full heart, Mitt Romney can't lose.
You also saw it as Donovan Mitchell was walking off the court in Oklahoma. He mentioned to the Thunder fans, "See you next year," implying that he believes they're going to close it out in Game 6. But last time a guy guaranteed a win in that series was Russell Westbrook. And then he was taunted by Mitt Romney halfway through the game, talking about his 4 fouls. They ended up losing that game really badly.
That's just a classic case of miscalculation, like Shane, Russell Westbrook guaranteed a win. He's like, sorry, guys.
He meant
next
game.
I meant Game 5, yeah.
Sports guys notoriously are not math guys,
Yeah.
so this is hard for us to predict these things.
Only sports guy that is a math guy, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and let's say he's not that great.
Nerd! Nerd!
Shouts to that UCLA education.
Since we are recording this on Thursday, draft hasn't happened yet. So here at Nosebleed Knowledge, we plan on having an emergency draft episode. We will have an episode detailing what we think about the draft. It'll come out on Sunday, so make sure you're looking for that. You can find that everywhere you find our regular podcast. We'll go ahead and get into our interview with Carrington Harrison, so here he is. We're here with Carrington Harrison of 610 Sports. Carrington, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Hey, no problem. You got a new podcast episode out from Stick to Sports. You got Dwayne Bowe on.
Yeah, he and I had a mutual friend, so he was doing the kind of media rounds last week. Whenever he was here in Kansas City, he was here for a YMCA Play 60 event. Dwayne Bowe's got a pretty interesting story. Grew up in Miami, grew up in a kind of tough environment, didn't start playing football until his junior year of high school, turned out to be a pretty phenomenal football player, got recruited by LSU. We kind of talked about that. We talked about his career with the Chiefs. He told this pretty funny story about the first thing he bought was a Bentley when he got his NFL check and how he parked in the handicap spot and Scott Pioli told him to move the car. So, he told a lot of cool stories. I definitely would suggest people to check it out. And we kind of talked about the music thing, too. He's a rapper now, and he was telling a story of how the Migos used to live with them before they got big and how he went on how he went on tour with Lil Wayne when he was 19 years old. I can't imagine being around Lil Wayne at the height of his career, and I'm 19.
That's wild.
Just sounds like it was a lot of debauchery happening around Dwayne Bowe.
I can imagine, for sure.
You're a big rap fan. We've seen it on Twitter. What do you think of that new J. Cole album?
I like it. The first time I went through it, I gave it a 6.5. Kind of listening to it more. I probably like a little bit more of the songs. I like Kevin's Heart more now that I've heard it a couple more times than I did the first time I heard it. I like Motivate more now than I heard it the first couple of times. The album's a little better than at least it was the first listen through. I'd probably give it a 7.5. J. Cole's kind of frustrating to me because I think J. Cole's an amazing rapper. I just don't know if – I remember there was a time where it was Drake, Kendrick, and Cole, and they were all kind of at the same tier because they were all kind of starting their careers at the same time. It's pretty obvious to me now that Drake and Kendrick have really pushed themselves at a much farther pace than what Cole is, and I think Cole I don't think he allows himself to be in that tier. He's like a souped up version of Wale.
Yeah, it's very true. One of the albums he has about 2014 Forest Hills Drive is still a banger. I still listen to that to this day.
Yeah, no, I like Forest Hill Drive. I think the problem, I don't know if it's necessarily a problem, and it's all art, so it's all subjective, is I think he saw that formula people would subscribe to, and he's never really gotten away from that formula.
Yeah,
he's made Forest Hill Drive now 3 straight albums. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's true.
What makes For Your Eyes Only that much different than Forest Hills? It's the same concept. What makes KOD much different than Forest Hill Drives? It's just, do you like X song different than that? But it's not. And the theme is different, but the whole philosophy of I'm going to have my in-house producers it's the same
Yeah.
formula every time. I mean, it's obviously working. Cole had a really successful launch and a release,
Yeah, it did.
and the album's been well received. I was actually listening to, like, the night it came out, when I was driving home, because I listened to it over my friend's house, and I was listening to some old Cole, and I was listening to, like, Power Trip and Nobody's Perfect, and I was thinking to myself of, how can J. Cole hear these songs and perform these songs and see how people respond to them, and then think, I never want to make a song like this again?
Yeah.
So now you came up with a little bit ago that Kanye Madness bracket. Tell us about how that went down and what you thought of it.
I thought it was pretty cool. I guess the long story short of how it came together was I was in the car, and I was kind of going through like a 2000s like random shuffle on Apple Music.
Oh yeah.
And I went to T-Pain. I was kind of listening to a lot of his stuff, and then Good Life came on, and something kind of hit me, and I was like, man, I haven't heard College Dropout in a while. So I went to College Dropout, and I was listening to Spaceships, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, Spaceships will probably be somebody's favorite Kanye West song. I was like, man, I should just do a bracket to figure out, what people's favorite Kanye song is, because, different music, and like we were talking about, music is pretty subjective. So I texted one of my really good friends the idea. He was like, man, let's do it. And I was like, cool. I sent a tweet out just to kind of get people's feelers of if they even liked the idea and if they thought it was a good idea. And it, the tweet was pretty popular on my timeline. A lot of people were like, yeah, you actually do it. Together, 11-person committee, kind of similar to the NCAA tournament. And we worked together to kind of seed it and how we thought the song should be ranked, and it obviously was pretty well received. So it was pretty cool to see people's appreciation of something that we all worked hard on to do. And I said this in like a couple other interviews. It's been a really rewarding feeling of, I don't know if many people can say that they did something that the internet seemed to appreciate. And you could say, like, set a trend on the internet. Like, a lot of people did brackets after that, and I do think that our bracket and the success of it kind of gave people the right mind of, hey, I want to do a bracket about X idea. So that was a really cool thing.
I know it definitely got us inspired because we did an MLB hat bracket to decide what the best bracket or what the best hat in the MLB was. So we did one of those.
Who did you guys pick?
The Florida Marlins ended up winning it. The old school, the teal one. I know.
The Florida Marlins hat?
Yeah.
Oh, my
Garbage.
goodness.
Blame Twitter.
If we're going classic, I'd probably say the Red Sox hat is like a little cooler than the Yankee hat. New school hat, I really like the Angels uniforms.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm not the biggest Red fan, but I really like the Angels uniforms a whole lot. I like their hat. That's probably the one I would vote for, but no, that's actually a pretty cool idea. I like that.
Yeah, it was nice.
Keeping on the topic of MLB there, what did you think of Salvi's return last night?
Man, I think Salvi is just, when you talk about just like sheer physical freaks.
Yeah.
Man, Salvi went down March 28th, and they said 4 to 6 weeks, and I always say with injuries, I always tend to be more on the later side than the earlier side, especially when it's something like a knee injury. It's not like it's 7 to 10 days, where if you come back in 8 days opposed to 10, it's like no harm, no foul. I mean, 2 weeks is, 11 games, 12 games. So for him to come back at I would say the most optimistic point of it, and I think if we look at how Salvi was rehabbing, Salvi could have came back last week, really. If he really, really wanted to, he could have came back last week. He hit a home run in Lorenzo Cain's return. I mean, I know they ended up losing, but this is going to be a season that doesn't have a lot of really good moments. That was a good moment yesterday.
Right.
Do you think they let him carry his own luggage anymore, or do you think they have someone else do that for him now?
I actually saw Sam Mellinger from the Kansas City Star.
Right.
He tweeted it that he actually is still carrying his luggage. I would maybe give that to somebody else. I feel like you got some equipment guys that can probably handle that light work for you. Like, I remember when I was an intern for Nick Wright, I knew what one of my job responsibility was. Nick would give me his debit card, and one of my job responsibilities every day was to go to Chipotle. Like, I just knew that was part of it. Like, I knew that was part of it. Like, I remember Nick didn't have to write it down. I knew exactly what the order was. So, it became ingrained in my mind. Like, if I was a equipment manager for the Royals, part of my new daily responsibility needs to be, hey, yo, Salvi, let me get that for you.
Right. That lineup last night for the Royals, I think, is the best lineup we're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, I would say aside from Jorge Bonifacio, I mean, that's the lineup you thought they were going to have at opening day. Yeah, I mean, I think the Royals aren't going to score a whole lot. Like, that's just not going to be something that they end up doing a lot this season. So, I mean, I think you just have to be realistic about your expectations of what kind of offense they're going to put together. And I think that yesterday's lineup, I would agree with you. Aside from Jorge Bonifacio, that is the best lineup they can put together.
Now, do you think we should have spent the money to keep Moustakis, or do you think we should have cut our ties there and try to save our money, maybe start a rebuilding team this year? It was kind of confusing offseason.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really spend a whole lot of money on Mike Moustakis. I mean, my big thing has kind of been this offseason is there's no reason why Cheslor Cuthbert shouldn't get 500 ABs. There's no reason why Jorge Bonifacio gets back. He shouldn't play every day. There's no reason for Jorge Soler not to play every day. So, I mean, and let's be honest, it's not like the Royals have a lot of young, talented guys that are being blocked right now. Like, that would be one thing if they thought Hunter Dozier was ready to play first base. There's no reason to sign Lucas Duda. But they've given you no reason to think that he can play first base, at least not right now. So I don't know if the signing of Mike Moustakis for 1 year, $6.5 million is really stopping the Royals from doing anything, and he's not blocking someone. Like, it's not like every day I'm thinking, man, X should be playing at third base over Mike Moustakis.
And once they had the signings of Duda and Jay, and along with Moustakis, I just immediately thought they were going to be trade bait for the trade deadline. Do you think that'll happen?
Yeah, I do think that's going to happen. I think that's the best case scenario. Like, I think the first half of the season clearly needs to be Moose, Duda, Jay, and Kelvin Herrera need to have good first halves of the seasons, and maybe even Danny Duffy to try to trade those guys at the trade deadline. Like, I've been talking about this on our show. Man, the Royals have a deficiency of talented players between 25 and 28. There's not that many guys on the team like Whit Merrifield. I know he just recently popped up. Now, Whit Merrifield's 29 years old.
Ooh.
Like, the Royals need to do a good job of finding players in that prime. When they won the World Series, then they had 6 really talented players between 25 and 28, or maybe 25 to 29 if you want to move it out one more year. And the Royals don't have that right now. So priority number one over the next 2 years needs to be, we got to find some guys that in that athletic prime that most athletes hit, we got to find guys that are ready to play.
What do you think this year? Like, how many wins do you think the Royals will get this year?
I think 75 is a very, very optimistic
I was going to
place
say
to be.
that's almost pretty generous.
Yeah, I mean, I just this team's not good.
Yeah.
Like, if I ask you, what do they do incredibly well? I guess you could say starting pitching, but it's not like their starting pitching is incredibly dynamic. Their bullpen's weak. Their offense is average, probably at best. And we'll see. We'll get hot. We'll see how Salvi does. We'll see if Gordon can turn things around. They're just going to take a lot of lumps.
Yeah.
This season. So, yeah, I mean, 75 to me is probably optimistic. It's probably closer to the 69 to 73 range.
Nice. Now, Meek Mill got released from jail yesterday. Does that give Philly an unfair advantage in the playoffs?
I mean, yesterday, it was kind of obvious they were going to win yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could bet against them yesterday.
It was pretty bumping.
Yeah, I don't know if many people know the story about Meek Mill. It's kind of a long story, so I don't really want to get into the whole thing of it on your guys' podcast. And people should really read, I think, why it was such a big deal that he was free. It's not like Meek committed some criminal act and that's why he was out, and it was just internet justice to try to get him out. Like, Meek Mill was in jail for a probation violation for popping a wheelie. That's why Meek Mill was in jail. And the judge, they had a background. So Meek had been on probation since he was 19, 20 years old. Mm-hmm. They had just had so many run-ins with each other. It was clear that this judge, in my opinion, has a personal vendetta against Meek Mill. So she was the only person that could reverse letting him out. So, Jay-Z was on his behalf. Beyonce's been on his behalf. The Patriots owner, Robert Kraft, was on his behalf. The owner of the Sixers. A lot of people were in the push of, hey, free Meek Mill. So, at some point it was going to happen. I'm happy it happened yesterday. I'm happy you got a chance to be at the game. People were kind of joking on Twitter. I was talking to my good friends about it. I can't imagine I was in jail for 5 months like Meek was, and my first place I go isn't home.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Like, the first place I go wasn't home. Now, I kind of understand in that situation. I would say that the Sixers owner was probably the biggest reason on why it happened, maybe as quickly as it did, just because he's in Philadelphia. He's probably the richest person in the state, certainly a lot of political connections if you're a billionaire owner. So, he was working pretty tireless behind the scenes. So I think if he tells them, hey, we really want you to be at the game, not saying that Meek has a responsibility to be at the game, but I could understand why, hey, this person is the biggest reason why I'm out of this situation.
Yeah. The
city wants to see me. It's a big deal that I'm home. I'm going to go to the game.
Do you think Meek Mill has one of the best release from jail photos? I think he has another one out now. He has the first one that came out when he was released from jail, is like him running around the corner. Now he has the other one with his phone out, looking at the TV camera.
Oh, I actually haven't even seen that picture. I've seen a couple of the videos. I saw someone ask him what kind of day it was, and he said today was a good day. everybody's seen the video of him ringing the bell.
Yeah.
I saw the one video where he didn't even take a shower, so the first shower he took out of jail was in the Sixers facility.
I didn't see that. That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's like Kevin Hart, like he's like drying himself off, and Kevin Hart's like taking a selfie with him or whatever. But yeah, I can't. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've seen that picture.
I'll have to send it to you. I'll find it and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, no, definitely send that to me. I don't think I've seen it.
Keeping on NBA, who do you like in the playoffs right now from the East and West?
I would probably pick the 76ers right now.
Yeah.
I for the last, I don't know how long now it is at this point, probably 8 years, it's been a very simple, if they have LeBron on their team, so I'm picking them. I don't really know if that's good enough anymore. Like, Cleveland just seems to have more problems. That no denying, LeBron's still the best player in the world, in my opinion, and he's going to get his 30, 35. I just don't trust that team's ability to defend. And if you can't defend, especially now with how teams are shooting threes and how teams can go on these offensive barrages, I just don't know if you can beat a good team like the Sixers 4 times out of 7. So I will give Cleveland the series against the Raptors. I think they beat the Raptors. I can't pick them to beat the Sixers in good consciousness, even with having LeBron. So I'll pick the Sixers. Ask me the question about the Warriors once I know how healthy Steph Curry is. If Steph's not healthy, I'll take the Rockets. If Steph is back and he's the same Steph Curry as before, the Warriors are the greatest offensive team in the history of basketball, so I'll take the Warriors.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is an insane year for the city of Philadelphia, though, because we were just talking about how good, like, the Eagles won the Super Bowl, Villanova won the national championship, the Sixers are kind of a pick now to win the NBA Finals. Like, how crazy do you think it is to live in Philadelphia right now?
You could say they're going on, like, one of the greatest, like, 8-month, 12-month runs in, sports history.
Yeah,
when you, like, really think about it. Maybe the other comparison is Boston with the Red Sox World Series and the Patriots being the Patriots for the last 17 years. Like, maybe that's it. But, man, I can't think of too many other ones, at least not off the top of my head, where I'm like, man, that's been a better time to live in that city. Like, think about how incredible it was in Kansas City to be a family. It was just the Royals good.
Yeah.
This was, Villanova, so they win the national championship, as you said. The Eagles, the Meek Mill, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You have the most exciting young team in the NBA.
Yeah, they just can't stop winning.
Yeah, no, every day, I imagine it's been really great as a sports fan. So, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of something that's been better.
That's a 30 for 30 in the making coming up here.
Sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
What do you think about Kawhi Leonard skipping the playoffs?
That's a good question. I think it's pretty obvious, at least behind the scenes, that he and either Greg Popovich or he and the upper management for the Spurs are not on the same page. I don't expect Kawhi Leonard to be back on the team next season. I just don't know how you can bring him back. It just seems like it's such a fractured relationship. And as good as Kawhi Leonard is, if you have to pick between Kawhi Leonard and Greg Popovich, I think that's I think you're picking Greg Popovich.
Yeah. I think this really hurts his prospect to other teams of skipping on the playoffs. And if I'm another owner, I don't want a guy who's healthy but won't play in the playoffs because he has issues with, like, the training staff or something like that, whatever it was. I think this really is a bad move for him on his part.
Yeah, I think, though, if you're Cleveland and you're serious about keeping LeBron, I think you keep LeBron, you bring Kawhi in with the pick, and so you trade the Nets pick, you go grab Kawhi Leonard, and you give him another piece, and you hope that next year your 3 of LeBron, a healthy, remotivated Kawhi Leonard, and Kevin Love is enough.
Yeah, I could see that happening too.
We're going to go ahead and move to some Chiefs stuff. What do you think the Chiefs' biggest need is now?
I'd probably put it at, I think, third corner is probably it, and depends on how much you believe in Steven Nelson, but I'd probably always take, at least picking another corner, I'd probably go third corner or pass rush. They were 25th in the NFL last year in pass rush, so I think I was a little disappointed they didn't grab somebody this offseason that could get to the quarterback. If the Chiefs could find somebody as a rookie that could give you 4 to 6 sacks, I think you'll be in good shape for next year.
Do you see any trade deals coming up with the Chiefs going into, like, the draft?
I don't think they're going to make any trades, at least not high up, at least. You got to think they don't have the first-round pick. They pick in the middle of the second round with pick 54. Therese actually was on our station, and he says he thinks at best they trade up to, like, 41, 42. I guess now that I say it, I could see them maybe trading one of the third-round picks that they got, or I guess that third-round pick that they got for Alex Smith, packaging that with their second-round pick to go up and get a guy they feel like they absolutely need.
Yeah.
Do you think Pat Mahomes will have what it takes this year to lead the team?
Yeah, I do. I think that Mahomes, I mean, if you're a rookie quarterback and you can't at least have some level of success in this system, I just don't know if there's a system you can be really successful in.
Yeah.
So, like, I might be harder on Mahomes in his first year next year because you had a year already in this offense.
Mm-hmm.
They've given you Kareem Hunt. They've given you Travis Kelce. They've given you Tyreek Hill. They gave you Sammy Watkins. And let's see what they do in the draft. Like, man, you can't say that you got drafted in a Cleveland Browns situation and that you don't have the pieces. I mean, you got drafted into a team that should have a top 10 offense in the NFL next year. I'm not saying you got to go out there and throw 35 touchdowns and 12 picks, but you need to go out there and put a 26 touchdown, 13 interception season together. I mean, I just think you have all the weapons there to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I got one more question for you. How much barbecue do you think Andy Reid eats on a daily basis, like poundage-wise?
I actually don't think he probably eats as much barbecue as we think that he does. I would guess from just talking to him, he seems like a guy that loves cheeseburgers a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
So, like,
I could see
if
that.
you ask me in a week span, what does he eat more of, cheeseburgers or barbecue, I'd probably pick cheeseburgers. But, I mean, he does seem like the guy that we've all been at, like, you know, your family barbecue, and he's got a little bit of pulled pork on his plate, a little bit of brisket, a little bit of ham, a couple burnt ends, and 3 ribs, and he has coleslaw, potato salad, and baked beans all on his plate because he's like, I'm not getting up for seconds. Like he actually kind of comes off to me as that guy.
Yeah.
I think learning that Andy Reid just doesn't eat barbecue on a daily basis is kind of like one of those don't meet your heroes scenarios. Like one of those things that you know. What's your favorite barbecue spot in KC?
Gates. I'm a big Gates guy.
Good stuff.
I'm a big beef on bun, big mixed plate guy. I love the sauce, so Gates is my favorite.
Little Tech 9, mixed plate right there.
OG.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I love that song. Well, thanks for coming on, Carrington. Really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks so much.
Big thanks to Carrington Harrison for coming on the podcast. Go check out his podcast, Stick to Sports, from 610 Radio. He's a great interview with Wimbo. Make sure to go check it out.
Where can we find that?
You can find that on iTunes. Go ahead and type in the little search bar up there, Stick to Sports. First one to come up. We'll go ahead and move on to some MLB baseball talk. The Red Sox, best team in baseball, got no hit. What do you guys think of that? There's a former Royal that no hit him.
Has a team that's been in a game and gotten 0 hits like they did gone on to win the World Series ever? Like, is that a stat we could look up? Because that would be interesting to me.
I'll look it up.
Okay. Because I don't know, like, they've been so good for so long, and they're like almost everyone's pick to go to the World Series. Like, I know it's way too early to predict that right now, but they've been playing so well. It's weird to see them get like destroyed. Like, I mean, not like destroyed, but like they had 0 offense in this game. You know, it's weird to see the Giants fall. Not the Giants, not the San Francisco Giants. The Giants in baseball right now, the Red Sox. It's weird to see them fall and like someone handle them like that because it's like, all right, well, they can be beat. You know.
In 1981, Nolan Ryan no-hit the Dodgers, and the Dodgers won the World Series. In 1988, the Phillies were perfect gamed and won the World Series.
Shit. So it's rare though.
Doesn't matter.
It's rare.
Yeah, it is rare.
I just think it's weird to see someone like you think has been so good and they're going to be so good for the whole season get taken down like that.
It's also wild because you think this is one of the best Red Sox teams that we've seen in recent memory. They've won World Series in 2004 and 2013, right, Kieran?
Yeah.
Yep, 2013. They've won World Series, but you look at this team, and on paper, this is by far one of the best offensive teams that they've had. They hadn't been no-hit since 1993, so it would have been a long time since the Red Sox were no-hit. And then it's wild that it happened to this team because they have so many weapons, and Manaea he pretty much just pitched out of his mind. And I think that's what happens sometimes when you pitch to contact instead of trying to pitch to strike everybody out like Ohtani did. We saw him get shelled by the Astros. Like, pitch to contact, let your defense make plays behind you, and, you know, no-hitters can happen every once in a while. So,
Red Sox also won in 2007. They beat the Rockies.
oh, okay. All right, so they've won a lot of World Series. I only remember the ones where they beat the Cardinals. I'm sorry.
This is how it works. Old friend alert, though, for Sean Manaea. We traded him for Ben Zobrist. Kansas City Royals did. Gets a no-no. Good to see him doing good stuff in Oakland.
How do you think this affects the Red Sox moving forward, though? Do you think they're going to start playing worse from this? Because in my head, if I'm on the Red Sox and we've been being so dominant for so long now, it's like, all right, we can bleed. You know, how does that affect them going forward? Do you think?
I think they'll be okay. Alex Cora is cool as a cucumber, so I think he's like I think they understand that, yeah, it's a no-hitter, yeah, it's embarrassing, but it's one loss, and they've only had 3 others. At the time of the no-hitter, they'd only lost 3 other times. So I think they'll be okay. They're still beating teams pretty bad, and they'll be okay.
Also, Tuck mentioned the old friend alert, and I just want to mention the Royals and Brewers series because we got to see Gordon and Perez come back.
Yeah.
And we got to see Perez smack a home run. And then later in the game, we got to see Lorenzo Cain smack a home run. Also, big ups to Tucker because he said at the beginning of the year, I think it was Red Sox-Brewers World Series, right? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Brewers have won 8 in a row. They're probably the hottest team in baseball right now. So big ups to Tucker for that prediction because it just seems to be coming together for those 2 teams you picked.
That was in spring training, too. Before spring training started, I made that blog, so a little bit of luck goes into that. We talked with Carrington a little bit about the Royals and how their lineup is probably the best it's going to be, especially without Jorge Bonifacio. And I definitely think that's true. If you look, we keep moving Whit Merrifield all around, like the infield. We have him at second, we have him at first, right field, center field. And I think that's just because we were short on guys. Now we got Alex Gordon back, Salvador Perez back. Salvi's really the heartbeat of that team. So I think once you get him back, we'll start to see us winning some more games.
What I think is wild about baseball, I think it's one of the more respectful sports as far as fan bases go. Can you imagine if in any other sport, one of your best players on the team leaves, not necessarily by his choice, but he does leave, goes to another team, and then comes back to your stadium and plays you, and then they give him a standing ovation as he walks up? Can you imagine if Gronkowski left the Patriots when his contract runs up, goes to we'll say I don't know, the Jets or something like that, who's not necessarily a threat to them in the past, but they play them a lot, and he comes back into Gillette Stadium? Do you think the Pats fans are cheering for Gronk coming back on the field?
I don't think they would because he went to New York, and Boston fans are kind of dicks. So in that regard, I don't think necessarily we would welcome him back a whole lot, but you can't deny what he did for the organization. Just like Locaine did for the Royals, Gronkowski gave them a championship, so you have to respect what he did in his time there. So I don't think we would be too hostile. That being said, that's probably the worst city to pick for that analogy, but
yeah.
Okay, so I'll pick a better city. Let's pick Kansas City. Same city. Alex Smith comes back with the Redskins now to play in Arrowhead. Do you think the Chiefs fans are cheering for Alex Smith as he walks through the doors? I know he didn't do as much as Locaine did for the Royals, but
now the Chiefs and Royals are 2 different animals. I know
that's what I'm saying, because it's 2 different sports.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah. But I'm saying Chiefs fans and Royals fans can be the same person, but 2 completely different types of fan. I know I'm a more irrational Chiefs fan than I am an irrational Royals fan. I guess I just expect so much from the Chiefs because, all my life the Royals haven't been very good.
Yeah. I think that has something to do with the sport, though, because I think when you're a baseball fan, it's the history of the game. It's like America's first sport or whatever, and there's just so much history of, liking it and being respectful of the players more so than in football.
If he does come back, Alex Smith comes back, I'll cheer for him. I don't think that he did anything wrong. We traded him, so why would I be mad at us trading him?
Well, Kieran, how'd you feel? I mean, he went to a different conference. Is what we saw Locaine do. Left conferences. Albert Pujols, when he left St. Louis, I know that Cardinals fans. I think at the time Cardinals fans were mad, right? How did you react when Pujols left? And they probably had to come back and play at least a little bit, or you probably had to go out there and play. How did Cardinals fans see an Albert Pujols in an Angels jersey for the first time? Because I imagine it's not too different from the way Royals fans feel about Locaine.
I know at the time Cardinals fans were really upset at Pujols, but they understood because he made it clear that what he was going for was years. I think the Cardinals offered him the same amount of money, but Pujols wanted job security. So I think what the Cardinals were angry at the time, now further down the road, I think it helped that his first season with the Angels, not great. And since he signed somewhere else and the Cardinals offered him a qualifying offer, they got a pick. And with that pick, the Cardinals drafted Michael Wacha. So a big piece to their rotation and playoff runs that they've had before. So, yeah, Cardinals fans were upset. I'm not 100% sure if he's played in Busch Stadium since then. The year that Pujols signed somewhere else, it probably would have been mixed reviews. He'll get cheered now, no matter what. It's just a bunch of circumstances. So, like Tuck was saying, Alex Smith got traded. Not a lot he can do there. Chiefs fans will probably cheer for him. I know Jason Hayward got booed because he went to the Cubs. So it's just a bunch of circumstances like that. Like, where do they sign? How do they get there? stuff like that. So I think Colts fans, I think they cheered for Peyton Manning when he came back with the Broncos. It's just all circumstantial.
Yeah. I also think it depends on team, and like the type of fan base that you have, because the Rays lost David Price. David Price was on the 2008 team that went to the World Series, lost to the Phillies. And the Rays, every time he came back to pinch, they give him a pretty hearty ovation for what he did for Tampa Bay, because that's a small market team. So despite the fact that he bounced around with the Blue Jays and Red Sox now and stayed in the division, the Rays fans still, show David Price respect. But you had a guy like Jacoby Ellsbury, who went Red Sox to Yankees, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so a move like that from a franchise like that, especially when the Red Sox have been so successful with him and he was a fan favorite, he did not get a very nice reception, when he went back to Boston to play. So I think it kind of depends on the team, but I would agree with Shane that baseball is such a respectful sport, like between the players and between like players and fans, that you won't see a whole lot of animosity from players switching teams, coming back and playing your team.
I know when David Freese comes back, even though he played for division rival Pirates, he did so much for St. Louis. He was a St. Louis boy. He got a standing ovation every time the Pirates came to town.
Do the Cardinals also give like standing ovations to Nelson Cruz every time he comes to play because he misplayed that ball in right field that allowed David Freese to make those two or hit those 2 home runs in Game 6?
Cardinals don't wind up playing a lot of AL West teams like that often. So like they've played the Angels, but they played the Angels in Anaheim, and that was in 2014. I'm not sure the last time they played the Mariners in Busch Stadium. So honestly, for Nelson Cruz, they probably not. I mean, even though the best fans in baseball count would make it out to seem that way, but not all Cardinals fans are dicks. Just the really loud ones, they're the dicks.
It's very true. With any fan base, really. You just have the good ones like us, like that we think that we are, and then you have the other ones that just run their mouth and just say idiotic things. It really just ruined the whole fan base for everybody.
Shout out Tyler Henry.
Jackson Welch, too.
Bailey Party.
Jackson Welch is not here this podcast because he's a little dick.
Nebraska fans around Northwest. Listen up. We're
I don't
talking
think
about
they've
you.
played in Busch.
We are starting
Don't
a
listen to
club
him,
called
guys.
We're starting a club called Douchebags Ruined Our Favorite Teams. So that's just for people who
I have a big list of douchebags who've ruined my favorite
That's
team.
just for people who've had a favorite team and some douchebag has come and been an arrogant little fuck about it, and you can join us. We meet in the AV club or the AV room on Wednesdays.
There's been some new rule changes proposed to the NCAA to take care of the one-and-done rule. The Commission of College Basketball, led by former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, released a detailed 60-page report Wednesday. There's no way I'd be able to read that whole thing. 7 months after the group was formed by the NCAA in response to a federal corruption investigation that rocked college basketball. We know a lot of the Blue Bloods were named in that. Arizona, Kansas was most recently named in it. Haha, Kansas. 10 people, including some assistant coaches, have been charged in a bribery and kickback scheme. So this new rule is focused on getting rid of the one-and-done rule, so it would make it where 18-year-olds can come and go ahead and join the National Basketball Association, pull LeBron, pull Kevin Garnett, Kobe. What do you guys think about that? It's an interesting rule to change, especially now.
This rule is designed for a very select few players. So a guy like DeAndre Ayton, who the big story came out, Arizona, the corruption, Sean Miller and all that. It was about DeAndre Ayton and the payment that he received. DeAndre Ayton is now probably the number 1 overall prospect. He is not going to get in trouble for receiving money if he did receive money from Arizona. The school is the one who's going to get in trouble. The rule is kind of designed to not only help the high school players, like kind of avoid that 1 year of college, but it's also designed to help the schools. You know, you're not going to recruit these guys that are going to be asking for money. If they want money, then they're going to try to enroll in the draft, do all that. I think for a lot of these high schooler players, we talked about this earlier, and I agreed with the point that Kieran made earlier, that he said a lot of the high school players early on are going to try to do this, straight from high school to the NBA route, and they're going to end up getting an education at Reality Check Tech, because a lot of NBA teams are not going to take the chances on these high school guys who think that they're better than they are. So I think it's going to be very incumbent upon coaches, upon parents of these players, to really sit down with the kids and say, okay, Like, we understand this rule's in place, and it's a good rule if they get it changed by 2020, which it looks like they will. It's a good rule to have in place, but maybe, just maybe, you need to go to college 2-3 years, kind of find out where you are as a person, as a basketball player. And I think from there you'll see not only like the NBA kind of grow a little bit when they've got guys who come straight from high school. You get all the great players like right away. But I also think you'll see a lot of personal growth amongst players who come out of college, and you won't have like the one and done attitudes and all these guys who kind of flame out early on because they think they're better than they are.
Those kids that declare for the draft straight out of high school and don't get drafted, they're therefore ineligible to play college, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have an agent.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I think I agree with Toby. This is going to wake a lot of kids up to how good they actually are.
Another thing they are changing is now in college basketball, you can declare for the draft, not sign an agent, and then decide to come back. Now you can't do that.
That makes a whole lot of sense too. Because I think if you make the commitment to go from high school to the NBA and you can't come back, to play college basketball,
right,
then it should be the same for college guys who declare for the NBA draft, then can't come back to play college basketball. The rule right now, I think, is a good rule because I like a lot of guys testing it, not signing with agents, and then like being able to come back to college and say, okay, this is what I have to work on to get to that level where I want to become a professional athlete and all that. I think that what the NBA and NCAA are doing to try to like prevent the problems they had this season, I think it's really good for both sides because there's going to be a lot of problems that are going to be solved from this rule change. And I mean, even now we see guys like Darius Baisley this year, who is the number 9 recruit in the entire country. He was going to Syracuse. He chose to play in the NBA Developmental League for a season instead. So he's actually going to be getting paid to play basketball here in the United States. And then next year he's going to be eligible to get drafted or get moved up, per se, if he's on the NBA D-League team. So I think that there's options for these guys already with the one-and-done rule in place. But I think getting rid of the one-and-done rule will actually strengthen both the NBA and collegiate basketball down the road. Maybe not right away, but down the road.
We disagree on that, but I'll get to it later.
I think it could strengthen the competition in NCAA basketball. Like, if all the top players, or if a majority of the top players try directly to go to the NBA, that really shrinks the talent gap in between the top teams and the rest of the teams. So maybe we won't see any of these powerhouse teams, or we won't see them for a couple of years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I still don't think there's going to be much of a demand for kids going straight from high school to the NBA. Like, how many people in the NBA right now have been successful from that before it was a rule? Like, there was like LeBron, Kevin Garnett, and Kobe were like the big 3 I can think of right now off the top of my head.
It's literally the best players in high school who are going to come into college and literally be the best players in college are the only ones who this rule is applied for. Like Marvin Bagley could have done it this year. DeAndre Ayton could have done it this year. Maybe Mo Bamba, because you like a guy who's that tall and has that wingspan. Those are the guys that could have done it. I really doubt that any other freshman in the entire, in all of college basketball could have just come straight from high school, gone to the NBA, and been drafted as high as they wanted to be drafted.
I think there's going to be a lot of seniors and this is coming from just me, but I think there's going to be a lot of seniors who, for the next 3 to 5 years, who try to go directly from high school to the NBA, because I think TJ Moe talked about this before, but athletes are all narcissists. They all believe in themselves, and especially in this day and age where people are constantly telling people how great they are. So they're going to truly believe that they're the greatest, and so they're going to try to go, and they're just going to forego college. And if they declare for the draft, they can't go to college. So there'll be a bunch of guys who try to do that, and then hopefully reality check hits them, and they're like, oh, crap, we needed college more than college needed us. And so they'll go, and maybe it'll strengthen the college basketball. Maybe it'll even strengthen the European Basketball League. So
I think that's true for at least the next couple of years. I think you will have a couple of years where kids over declare for the draft, where there's too many when they're not really good enough, and then they'll be then people start to catch on, because I feel like kids like Zion Williamson and what's that kid going to North Carolina? What's his name? Nasir Little. I don't think those guys can go straight to the NBA. Those guys are playing up against scrubs in high school. They're not playing good competition. Where guys like LeBron, they weren't playing good competition, but they were so good against that non-competition that they were obviously good choices for the NBA.
I actually think this will hurt both leagues, both the college basketball and the NBA. You think the one-and-done rule is in place for the older players. so the older players can be able to play for a longer amount of time, so they're just not forced out by these 18-year-olds that are going to come in. These 18-year-olds, really, if you think about it, are doing it for the money. I know that they think that they're good, but there's some of them that are just going to say, hey, I don't want to go to college. I don't want to struggle for money. I'm just going to go straight to the draft and go for money. They get their money. They aren't very good. It'll weaken the talent of, like, the teams. It doesn't restrict you if you can go. It doesn't say, well, you have to be this good on this scale for you to be able to go to the draft. So kids can just do that. These kids that should be going to college are going just for the money.
Just to argue that point, that doesn't mean they're going to get drafted and get the money. So it's not necessarily hurting the older players by letting them declare for the draft because they won't get drafted.
There's going to be a lot of people who won't pan out. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people will go because they think they can make it, but they won't. But they're only going for the money.
But I think you're assuming that they get drafted.
But if they're good enough to declare for the draft, they're probably going to get drafted.
If they think they're good enough to declare for the draft.
It's like a brain twister.
I think that, okay, I think it helps college basketball in the long run. I think it hurts certain college basketball players, and I think it has little effect on the NBA.
You look at a team like the Miami Heat this year. The Miami Heat have a lot of guys on the team who will not play. They just got bounced in 5 games by the 76ers. They're not going to, they're done. Udonis Haslem is taking up a roster spot. Udonis Haslem plays in no games. I get wanting to protect the players who have been in your league for so long, like Haslem, like a Vince Carter, guys like that. But I think you kind of dilute some of the talent on teams when you keep guys that are too old to play anymore, which I think is who the rule is protecting, that you have this one and done so they can just get more years and more years. And it's also some guys will go one and done, and they should not go one and done, and you'll see them not pan out. There's a lot of guys that aren't going to pan out, whether they come straight from high school, whether they come from college, because that's just the nature of the beast that is professional sports. So, like, you see a guy like Jonathan Isaac this year was drafted by the Magic, 6th overall, and he was drafted really high because they thought he had a lot of upside, a lot of, this, that, whatever, length, athleticism for a 6'9" guy, and he didn't do hardly anything his rookie season. And there's a lot of NBA teams who aren't going to give guys time, but that's on the owners, the GMs, and all that, who aren't going to give players time to pan out, or those owners that are willing to risk drafting a high school player on the assumption that they do pan out, because it's really just going to be a crapshoot from there, just like any other draft, I feel like. So I could see guys who want to go straight for the money, but those guys aren't going to last in the league, and you're just going to get rid of them. You're going to get better players.
Last point that I have to make, if I'm a college basketball fan, I'm excited about this rule because that means players coming to my college genuinely want to be at my college for a good amount of time. And that means, like you've all seen the 30 for 30 Requiem for the Big East, that those teams had Allen Iverson, they had Patrick Ewing and stuff like that. These rivalries were intense because they had star players, and those star players wanted to be there, and they were there for a long time. So we see these matchups like Duke versus North Carolina. Yeah, they're good and they're intense, but they don't have the edge that they had when Christian Laettner and them were there. So if I'm a college basketball fan, I'm excited about what this potential means for rivalries and the intensity of the game and stuff like that. Not saying that the game won't be intense, but right now we're playing with a bunch of guys the one and dones at Duke and these other schools who don't really want to be there. They're just there because it's the stepping stone from high school to NBA. But with this rule, the guys who go to college will want to be at college, and they'll care about their school, and they'll play hard against these teams. So maybe that means the Duke and North Carolina rivalries are taking the next step. Maybe that means Mizzou and Kansas rivalry. Maybe that's taking the next step. Just rivalries like that. I'm excited about it.
To argue Kieran's point, I think the talent gap will just become even bigger between these schools that are blue bloods, because still the best players in the country are going to go to these blue blood schools, these Kansases with the good coaches, Duke. They're still going to go there, but the talent's just not going to be there for the other players. If you have 18-year-olds declaring for the draft that think that they're good enough, you have these 18-year-olds like DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley declaring to Duke, Arizona. You're not going to have those athletes if they can just go straight to the draft. So I think the talent gap becomes bigger between mid-majors, Mizzou's not a mid-major, but Mizzou talent level, and then a North Carolina or a Duke.
And it wasn't even that long ago that we saw guys who would stay the full 4 years.
Right.
Those Duke-North Carolina rivalries, you don't even have to go all the way back to Laettner to find the guys who stayed 4 years. You saw Ty Lawson, Tyler Hansborough's North Carolina versus, the Singler and Greg Paulus, John Shire Duke teams. So there's guys who will stay 4 years for you, and I like to go back to the 2003 draft because that's a draft that a lot of people like to look at in the NBA and say this was one of the best drafts ever. What you had in that draft was you had 4 guys, and you knew they were going to be the top 4 guys in that draft. You had LeBron James, who was coming straight out of high school, but he's the greatest basketball player we've ever seen. Then you had Darko Milicic, a guy from Europe. So people knew he was a good basketball player in Europe, but you didn't really know what he brought to the United States. Then you had Dwayne Wade, also one of the best basketball players we've seen in this generation, went to school at Marquette, went to the Final Four in 2003. Carmelo Anthony, Syracuse, won the national championship in 2003. So we see a lot of guys who they had that one-and-done rule in place, but we still had stars in college basketball, And even then, you had teams that maybe weren't as talented who were still going to go a long way. I know it's ironic. It's Kansas, so it's a blue blood team, but Kansas went to that 2003 national championship, and their best players were Nick Collison and Kirk Heinrich, playing against Carmelo Anthony and Akeem Warwick at Syracuse. So I think as much as we'd like to say that the competition will space itself out more, the more guys get to stay at Kentucky under Calipari, the more guys will get to stay at Duke under Coach K. I feel like it's the same thing in college basketball every year. It's a 64-team tournament. One loss and you're done. So that's what makes college basketball so great is that we do have these Goliath teams, but on any given night, a small team could beat one of these big teams. And I feel like college basketball is going to be just fine where it's at, whether the one-and-done rule stays, whether it goes, because it is the most unpredictable tournament in the world probably, aside from that 2012 Kentucky team, who had all one-and-done, surprisingly. But I just feel like the competition – we won't see the competition level kind of decrease or increase tremendously through this rule change. I think we'll just see a lot more of I think we'll see a lot more stick-to-itiveness. Seniors in college basketball, senior nights will mean something more now, and fans will get to see players for, like Kieran said, 2-3 years, and you'll get to love the players that come there, which I know I have no problem with at Michigan. None of our guys are one-and-dones, but for programs like Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, you'll get to see all these guys for 2-3 years, and so I think that'll actually make the product on the court better for even the Blue Bloods.
Final thoughts, Shane?
Why isn't there mouse-flavored cat food? Yeah. Chew on that one.
Toby?
Shout out to Michigan baseball. They've won 20 straight games in a row, haven't lost in conference, and a lot of people don't follow college baseball, but Michigan baseball, we'll see you in Omaha this year. I'm super excited. Best team in the country right now. No hotter team in sports. Go Michigan baseball.
KB?
Meatloaf is both an underrated singer and an underrated dinner food.
My final thought, the Red Sox have more Grand Slams this season than 3 teams have wins, the Royals and White Sox at 4, and the Reds at 3.
And the Red Sox didn't have a single Grand Slam last season.
How about that?
Another fun fact.
That's been this week's episode of Nosebleed Radio. Thanks for tuning in. Follow us on Twitter at NosebleedSnow. Like us on Facebook, Nosebleed Knowledge. We'll see ya.